that actors go through.
It had never occurred to him some of the pluses and minuses of acting and how you approach a role, you know, given the circumstances of having no other obligations. I would imagine that he could probably come away from that experience with an enhanced respect for film acting and at the same time a degraded respect for film acting.
We were in this huge airplane hangar in Mobile, Alabama, where the temperature was 120 degrees, and we had weeks and weeks and weeks of standing around and pointing up at the sky and pretending things were there, and we were so hot. And if you had to be encased in any of those modules where they were the scientists, which I was occasionally, it could be 140 degrees in those things. In fact, I'm not sure if it was a rumor, but the hangar was so big and it was so hot around the lights, but it was cooler towards the top, there was a rumor that it could start to rain at any point.
The conditions that we worked under ranged from fun to frightening. And part of the shoot was a simple nightmare.
We had these incredible storms. I mean, we would have these unbelievable summer storms. I mean, lightning, and if you've been in the South, you know what I'm talking about. And I heard this crack of thunder, and I walked deep into the set, and suddenly a little pinhole of light appeared. And then it got bigger, and then it just exploded.
In the entire south half of the hangar, while we were shooting, we're looking over there going, look, look, suddenly the hangar blew off. I mean, literally the entire side of this thing, I don't know, 95 feet high, 150 feet wide, just went flying off into the air, exposing us to the elements.
And it just blew the set apart, which was pretty sad, and which made us then go into a night orbit where we had to shoot everything at night until we could repair that. Stephen had so many ideas, and he had these ideas of these little cubes, like just little light cubes is what they were, and they preceded the aliens, and they would sort of look around, sort of to check things out. And so with these streams of little cubicles that flew around and sort of childlike, you know, played around the cameraman and the various scientific little cubicles and stuff. And they were just these delightful things. It was like square Tinkerbell dust.
And so there were cuboid tests photographed, and then there were a few live action shots done where we rigged these little square boxes that were little wireframe boxes with very bright light bulbs inside with plastic scrim on them, and rigged them in wires for what was going to be just some of the coverage and close-ups in that sequence. And even I was photographed as one of the technicians in a little cameo. But none of us could ever figure out how to make that sequence work. It would definitely required today's level of sophistication of computer graphics. It would be easy to do it today. Then it was not possible.
Stephen said to me at one point, no matter how high the budget of a movie, you always leave that day wishing you had gotten 3 more shots and wishing you could have fixed one shot or another shot. And at one point at the end, when we were shooting the spaceship with the loud noises, there's a sequence in which a window blows out, a huge sugar glass window. It's like 4 feet by 8 feet. And they weren't going to do it at all, because if you did it once, you had to have like 5 pieces of glass, because you had to do it a number of times, shot from different angles. What if it didn't go well the first time? And I heard this little whispering on the side. And it turned out later on that Stephen said it was so important to him that to have that insert of the glass breaking to signify the power of the sound, that Stephen had gone over and negotiated that he personally was going to pay for those pieces of glass. But it mattered so much to him, and he knew how important it was, and he did use that shot in the movie.
I remember specifically coming down the mothership, and that's another common question. What was the mothership like? And I'm like, well, not a whole lot to it. You know, that was later on, that special effects. To me, it was an embarrassing situation because I had to wear ballet slippers walking down on this piece of glass in order to keep myself from falling. And to a 4-year-old male child, wearing ballet slippers is just, you know, it's not a cool thing to do. For the very last sequence where I've come off of the spaceship and I'm with my mom, Melinda Dillon, and he said, Cary, you need to pretend for me now that you're never going to see your friends again. They're all going away.
Are they going away? Yes. Sure.
Well, I didn't understand that he wanted me to pretend. I'd been on this movie set for like 3 months. I had not seen my childhood friends from home, and I misunderstood him and thought, I'm never going to see all my childhood buddies again. I got very upset. So when we started the scene, I started to cry, which made Melinda Dillon start to cry, which made everybody on the set start to cry. It was a very pure moment. And from the scenes, I earned a nickname, One Take Cary.
Because he was so spontaneous, you couldn't have a take two. So most of Cary's shots are take one. Almost all of Cary's stuff in the movie is take one.
And Stephen had a shirt made for me that said One Take Cary, because a lot of the things that you see in the film were the first or second take that Steven Spielberg set up for us to do.
I had a lot of pre-production time and a good year on the project before we started shooting. So I was sort of messing around with a lot of different concepts, and the alien certainly was one. And I made some sketches, naive little sketches of two little creatures, based on articles that I read on how people saw these little things.
I wanted the aliens to look like aliens. I did not want the aliens to look like people in costumes. So my first idea was to get an orangutan and dress the orangutan up in an ET suit and let the ET behave almost simian-like. So we actually got a spandex suit and dressed this orangutan up in this bodysuit and then put this head on. And then I also thought it would be interesting to put him on roller skates and push him off of a mylar ramp so he'd come down like he's floating. Well, it all went wrong. We had a couple cameras set up for the test. For one thing, the first image was you saw the handler bringing out the orangutan, and then you saw the orangutan running back and jumping into the handler's arms. And it got to be almost like a taffy pull, with the orangutan being shoved out by human hands, and the minute the guy tried to let go, the orangutan would turn and grab onto the hand, and then climb up to the body off camera, and then four hands would push the orangutan out. The orangutan would grab onto two of those four hands and grab back onto a body. They finally got this thing on roller skates by pushing him out. He went like this. First thing he did was he grabbed his head and ripped it off and threw his head away. Then he went roller skating backwards down the ramp. And I realized in about 5 minutes that wasn't going to work. So plan B. Plan B was to do marionettes. I was going to marionette 70 aliens and have 70 puppeteers on scaffolding above.
There was one test that needed to be directed and shot on the stage of some puppets. And it involved trying to solve what the lighting would be like and how the puppets would move and what frame we'd shoot at, etc., etc. So I shot a test of that very lanky, thin puppet that comes out and sort of hovers out and puts his arms up. It was just a wire-hung puppet.
But this was before the age of wire removal, digital wire removal, and unless you could light it, so none of those wires showed up, there was no way to get rid of the wires. And I did a test on that, and no matter how they lit it, they'd have to gobo all the wires. We were going to have big arcs. We had almost 80 arcs on that in that dirigible hangar. There was no way you can gobo 60 puppeteers with like 500 strings, and that was just impossible. You could almost project visually how that wouldn't, be workable. So I threw that out, and my last idea was to actually have little girls, because they move differently than little boys, much more gracefully, in costume. And we just tried to reshape the configuration of their bodies a bit so they wouldn't look too human, and that's what it wound up being. And also by backlighting it and letting the camera flirt with the aliens and the aliens flirt with the camera.
And Steven decided that when we shot the aliens to really not show them too much. We shot them in silhouettes, and we shot them with a lot of lights, overexposing them. So he just wanted to create shapes and a mystery about them rather than really showing them.
We had different pools of the kids who were playing the extraterrestrials, and a lot of them dropped out because they started working months and months before the actual sequence. Susan Heldfond was the movement coach.
She was wonderful. She really was a dancer, and she was able to train all of these little girls, there were about 60 or 70 of them, how to move and how to walk, and she did a wonderful job making almost like a dance troupe.
The extraterrestrials were supposed to, and this never really worked out, they were supposed to move very, very quickly. Now, they were going to shoot the extraterrestrials at a lower speed so that it would appear that the action was all speeded up. So the extraterrestrials, to accentuate this, they were all supposed to shuffle their feet and move their hands like this and move really jumpy. Then when the film was speeded up, they would be so fast, they would be like flies buzzing around. It would be so exciting. Well, in the meantime, they simultaneously trained a bunch of mimes who were pretending to be technicians, American, from Earth technicians. So the mimes would run over to see the extraterrestrials in slow motion, so that when the camera was sped up, they would get to be correct, and the extraterrestrials who were going like this, fast hands, fast feet, they'd yell, they would get even faster, and it would all be this perfect blend. But of course, you can't really deal with human motion that way. So there's no real way to slow yourself down so that you all speed up correctly. And some were on wires, they flew, they twirled around. It was very complicated. They worked for months and months. They couldn't use any of that stuff.